The great failed romances of the 20th century. Are they gonna make it? Let's find out. The great failed romances of the 20th century. They say love's forever, but I've got my doubts.
Welcome to the Great Failed Romances of the 20th Century. I'm singer-songwriter and historian Teddy Gray.
And I'm Rebel Wilson without a cause, Sam Kaufman. So Teddy, which famous horn dogs will we be exploiting today?
Well, Sam, continuing with the trend of last week's episode, today we'll be discussing the unconfirmed but probable affair between James Dean and Marlon Brando.
Does that mean it's another installment of Unwritten Gay?
Unwritten gay romantic history, yes.
I was going to get it. Give me a minute.
James Dean traveled to Hollywood in hopes of making it as an actor after a troubled childhood and a brief stint at UCLA. His charismatic personality and undeniable good looks helped him to land some minor roles early on in his 20s, but he had yet to truly break out as a star until he did some more formal training, taking acting classes at the Actors Studio and studying under Lee Strasberg, famous for schooling many prominent actors of the time, including Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando was already a star in the early 1950s, thanks to his performances in A Streetcar Named Desire and The Wild One, and James Dean idolized him from the start, being drawn in by Brando's sex appeal and larger-than-life attitude.
James Dean would later enroll in an acting seminar that Marlon Brando taught just to get his attention, and attempted to strike up a friendship. At first, Marlon resisted, and he later recalled that he responded to Dean's advances by giving him the number of a psychoanalyst. "And he went," Brando later said. "At least his work improved."
Aw, that's just like how we met. Except you were the psychoanalyst. Am I cured yet, Dr. Gray?
As long as those weekly payments keep on coming in, I think it should be any year now. Oh.
James Dean's sexuality has been under debate for decades since his death. While he was briefly engaged to actress Pierre Angeline, he is typically referred to these days as bisexual, due to his rumored relationships with numerous men, many of them famous. Some have even suggested that he only had sex with women to advance his career.
Some of James' rumored gay lovers include, but are not limited to, Rock Hudson, Clifton Webb, Jack Simmons, Rogers Brackett, Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, and even Walt Disney. Now, it should be noted that all of these are unconfirmed, and some of them are fairly unlikely. However, I really want them to be true, as you may be able to tell from my Disney/Dean fanfic, When You Kiss Upon a Car.
James Dean even claimed that he was homosexual to dodge the draft, but later said on the matter, "No, I'm not homosexual, but I'm also not going to go through my life with one hand behind my back."
Marlon Brando's sexuality has also been questioned. Given his long list of female and male companions over the years, it's safe to assume that Marlon was a bisexual, and a particularly voracious lover. He was irresistible to both men and women, and James Dean was no exception.
James Dean's attempts to get Marlon's attention grew more desperate as time went on. At one point, he even showed up to a party that he knew Marlon would be at, wearing the actor's famous outfit from The Wild One, hoping that he would notice.
Eventually, Marlon began to humor James' obsession, and the pair engaged in a brief but intense affair, at least from Dean's perspective. Marlon Brando's insatiable lust for sex meant that he had no qualms about taking in another partner, particularly one that he could easily control. Seizing on what he believed to be puppy love, Marlon proceeded to act with James the way he acted with many of his other lovers, sort of abusive but pretty hot.
Many have stated that the two of them were involved in a secret S&M relationship, with Marlon as the master and James as the slave. In James' own words, Marlon was the one entirely in charge of when they met up and what they would do, but James was so smitten that he didn't care. In addition to dominating him physically, Marlon would even go so far as to putting his cigarettes out on James, and he was too enamored to protest.
Dude, do you have a boner right now?
Shut up, dude. Don't ruin this for me. Don't look at me. Go to VO.
When friends of Dean saw what Marlon had done to him, they were rumored to have said, "Look how they massacred my boy." Composer Alec Wilder, a mutual friend of the two, even said they were definitely a couple. I really believe that Jimmy fell in love with Brando that year. As for Brando, I don't think he ever loved Jimmy. In my opinion, Brando was in love with Brando.
This sort of dynamic was par for the course for Marlon, and eventually, either out of kindness or boredom, he casually broke things off with James and moved on to other lovers. James, however, was not so easily cured of his love sickness, and would often follow Marlon around on dates, sometimes even staying outside his house and waiting for Marlon to come out.
It has also been alleged that while he was doing this, he would hold a big boombox over his head and play Peter Gabriel. While these actions were certainly stalkerish, Brando never really minded, probably getting a kick out of Dean's misery. But still, he'd had enough of wrestling with Jimmy, and eventually James had to move on. Thankfully, there were numerous men and women practically throwing themselves at the famous actors, so it wasn't too difficult to find a rebound. James, for one, just rung up his old pal Walt. Or at least that's what happens in my second fanfic, The Magic Kingdom.
Unfortunately for Dean, his reckless lifestyle and love of drag racing would soon catch up to him. After only shooting 3 movies in which he starred, James Dean tragically died in a car crash while speeding down Route 466. He was only 24.
Years later, when questioned about his affair with Dean, Brando would deny all charges, stating that James was never a friend of mine. He had an ID fixed about me, but nothing more.
But just as Dean's status has continued to grow since his death, so has the legend of he and Marlon's brief relationship. For a brief time period, 2 of America's most revered actors linked up and had some kinky,
Stinky
sex.
Rebel without a safe word, am I right? My safe word is Pinocchio, who makes a surprise guest appearance in my third fanfic, I've Got No Kinks to Turn Me On. So, Teddy, you've proved that the relationship between James Dean and Marlon Brando happened. Can you prove that this song is any good? And you will be timed.
This song is called Little Black Book, and it's about James Dean's infatuation with Marlon Brando, making numerous references not only to his attempts at flirting, but also to his long list of rumored gay lovers.
Is that it? Well, we still have 2 minutes left. I guess we could just talk about whatever we want. So global warming, a myth, right?
Just like the life of James Dean, we're going to cut this one short. Enjoy Little Black Book.
Notice me, I'm staying after class. Or do you want to live your life with a one and safe behind your back? Toy with me, I hear you take control. If you need a place to put your cigarettes out, I can play that role. Right next to Rock and Jack and Bill, right next to Walt and Paul and Will. Well, you can write your name and number down. I'll call you up when you need a thrill. Private parties, they let me in. If I came dressed in your outfit, would that get your attention? Right next to Rock and Jack and Bill, right next to Walt and Paul and Will. Well, you can write your name and number down. I'll call you up when you need a thrill. Some say you're baiting me, but I'm biting at the hook. I hope to see your name when I take a look in my little black book. I push my foot down on the pedal. It never hits me, I could crash. But Marlon, I am shackled, I am born in. Whatever you have always wanted, keep tearing me apart, I love it. Right next to Rock and Jack and Bill, right next to Walt and Paul and Will. Well, you can write your name and number down. I'll call you up when you need a thrill. Some say you're baiting me, but I'm biting at the hook. I'm a goner, dead from the first look. You're in my little black book. The great failed romances of the 20th century. Are they gonna make it? Let's find out. The great failed romances of the 20th century. They say love's forever, but I've got my doubts.